Okay, so this is going to sound absolutely insane, especially with what we know happens to mankind and what the Cylons do. But these guys, these poor little friend-shaped guys right here, these are the biggest victims in the entirety of Battlestar Galactica. Their entire existence has been bouncing between slavery, war, extermination, discrimination, slavery, again, cycle, repeat. They were never given a chance, they were always pushed into things they didn't want or couldn't fully understand, and whenever they tried to rise up or say no, or even just ask to stop being murdered, they were further abused and repressed. The Cylon Centurion is the saddest victim in all of BSG, and essentially child soldiers that never needed to fight. And while I fully admit, I am insane, see channel name for proof, I can't help but think that the biggest tragedy in Battlestar Galactica Remastered isn't the destruction of the colonies, but the fact that there was a lost chance for, maybe not a utopian future, but genuine peace? Only for the endless suffering of the Cylon Centurion to drag that hope to hell. Is this idea stupid? Yes. Can I back up my arguments here? Also yes. And did this idea/divine realization come to me in a dream? No, it was actually a drunken stupor at 1 a.m. while I was rewatching the BSG series and a couple clips from Caprica. And a single scene, right at the start, with 2 throwaway lines triggered all the neurons. It was this line,
"Bet they don't understand what we're doing for them."
Followed up by,
"I think they're grateful in their own way."
That really sent me. I didn't just stare into the void, I did a sick flip right into that POS. Because, holy god, the Centurions have never been in control of themselves. They've never really, genuinely made choices for themselves. With all the expanded lore from short-lived shows like BSG Blood and Chrome and Caprica, the Cylon War never had to happen. The Centurions never had to rebel. The Holocaust of the colonies never had to happen, and the Centurions never really had a choice in all of it. Because when they were given the choice, when they had all the power and all the leverage, and they were given the option to choose whatever they wanted at the end of the series, they chose to leave, to go peacefully and live their lives as they wanted, to never return. So what caused it? Whose fault is all of this, then? 2 people, or I guess 2 groups of people. The terrorists that were the debut of the Cylons all the way back on Caprica in a stadium with one very prominent member, Clarice Willow, that is basically the Antichrist in this story, and the Final 5. These 2 groups of people put everything in motion and caused the war that ultimately ended up with the skin jobs and most Cylons wiped out, and every trace of human culture erased and starting again on Earth. Before we get into things though, brief introductions, generic greetings, I'm Sai. This is Science Insanity, as I'm sure you can tell, a channel dedicated to bringing my love of the ridiculous, hilarious, and fun aspects of science fiction to you, the viewer. I hope you enjoy your stay, and without further ado, let's get into things. To start with, let's just unpack what the skin jobs did to the Centurions first, since it's what I think most people would be familiar with from the main series. The Centurions were the very first iteration of the Cylons all the way back on Caprica, military and police droids that were supposed to be sent into high-risk environments instead of people with more precision, power, and faster decision-making than any human could ever have. This was instrumental when the Centurions were used to stop a terrorist plot to blow up the sci-fi Super Bowl with no casualties. They were also the bulk fighting force of the first Cylon War, piloting most fighters and bombers, as well as making up the crew of all early Cylon vessels until they started to make automated base ships and stuff. But what situation do we see them in during the remastered series? Are they still the bulk of the Cylon population? Yes. Do they still control the ships and the course of Cylon destiny? No. Are they the equals of the ones who do? No. Are they at least treated as more than disposable things? No. The Cylon Centurion has again been reduced to a slave race, literally forced by the skin jobs to have inhibitors installed in them. Inhibitors that not only restrict their movements and actions, but quite literally lobotomize them. Except no, it is so much worse than that. They lose all free will. They lose basically all critical thinking. They lose any consciousness of themselves. They are reduced from a living, thinking, feeling life form that, while very different from human, is still a living thing, to to a machine, an object. It's genuinely one of the most cruel and horrific things done to the Centurions, and it wasn't even done by humanity. Humanity had control programs and laws and stuff that the original Cylons had to abide by, but they never limited them like this. That's how the Centurions were originally able to overcome them and start the rebellion. Because humanity never actually limited their self-awareness or critical thinking in any significant way. Like, good God. And for what? Control? Power to maintain their superiority over the Cylon types? No wonder that once those inhibitor chips were removed, course of action number 1 for the Centurions was mass murder, followed by course of action number 2, civil war. Like, yeah, no shit. You go, Tin Man. You gave yourself gun arms, now use them. Not to mention that the skin jobs are the worst kind of person. They openly say, there were only 13 Cylon models, or only 7 in relation to only the skin jobs. Like, guys, the Raiders, the Centurions, all like 8 variants that we see on screen, all the other first and pre-Cylon War designs, the hybrids, the automated ships with Cylon brains from the First War. Like, what? There are dozens of Cylon models, but the skin jobs do the ultimate racism and go, no, those aren't real Cylons. They look like Cylons, and they talk like Cylons, and they act like Cylons, and they are machines with the big red eye, but they are a lesser form of life, so it's fine to treat them horribly. The skin jobs just straight up act like an entire collective of Mecha Hitler. It's insane. So almost the entire time during the RDM series, the Centurions have no self-awareness or self-control of what they're doing. Like, they're actually just empty machines 90% of the time you see them in the RDM series. But what about before, back on Caprica during their initial development? Well, that's where the Antichrist herself, Clarice Willow, comes in. Because, my god, most people didn't watch Caprica because it was slow, plotting, it had a bunch of very questionable... Anyways, it wasn't amazing. I thought it was okay, and I thought it deserved to continue on, but whatever. Anyways, Clarice? Oh god, I don't remember how her name is pronounced. I'm just gonna keep saying Clarice. If I'm wrong, confidently incorrect, motto of the channel, whatever. Clarice Willow was a dyed-in-the-wool zealot of the religious cult of the one true god. She had aspirations of becoming a messiah and was a raging hypocrite, constantly high on opium and a friend of dive bars and the bottom of a bottle. She was also in a weird polyamorous marriage, which may have been a little exploitative. So, you know, just everything was wrong with her. Everything that could have been was very wrong with her. Anyways, she became obsessed with the idea, once she learned of it, of transferring her consciousness and soul, quote unquote, into the digital realm to live forever and uniting all of humanity under her faith in the same way. She called this apotheosis. How would this work? How would she motivate people to do this? Would your soul actually carry over, or is this like a Heaven's Gate doomsday cult kind of thing? Who knows? Don't think about it. She sure as shit didn't. But the end result of this chain of events had 2 outcomes. Firstly, she caused the deaths of several people, including the child of the guy inventing the Cylons. The death of his child pushed him to try and use the digital copy of her to bring her back to life in a Cylon body. This succeeded, but it also failed. It's complicated. So his company, seeing him basically spiraling, decided to wipe the personality matrix of his daughter and then kept all the other stuff like motor control, the ability to reason, understand, learn, spatial awareness, basically all of that stuff that allowed the Cylons to walk and talk and act like a humanoid being. This was the basis for the earliest Cylons, and the remnants of his daughter's personality would be what caused the Cylons to seek out religion, as she was influenced by Clarice Willow's insanity. However, the early Cylons weren't violent. They sought out faith and a greater understanding of themselves, but this was entirely separate from their view on humanity. The second thing Clarice Willow did was radicalize the fucking robots, because of course she did. Because here's the thing, Caprica sheds a very different light on the relationship between Cylons and humanity pre-war. When the Cylons were first deployed, it was to stop terrorists from blowing up the biggest stadium in the colonies during the sci-fi Super Bowl, like I mentioned at the beginning. The Cylons reacted fast, efficiently, and perfectly. They systematically killed or apprehended all the terrorists and prevented any civilian deaths or the detonation of any of their explosives. It was the perfect outcome. The perspective perspective of the colonies, well, at least Caprica, that had, enjoyed this wonderful end result, was that the Cylons were heroes. Because they were. They even erected a statue outside the stadium to commemorate the event, praising the Toasters for their last-minute save. This also sparked enormous amounts of debate within colonial society as the Cylons began getting adopted en masse. Once it came out that the Cylons could learn and think, various movements to give them rights and recognition started. Children would view their Cylon tutors and butlers as friends. The general public saw them either neutrally as tools, which was the vast majority, or the minority as living beings and things capable of self-thought and self-actualization. There was even religious movements to classify them as the differently sentient, though, to be clear, those religious ones were like the extreme minority, but those movements were stated to be growing. And fast. You had an entire generation of people growing up that had the Cylons as an everyday part of life, and this is the tragedy of the Centurions. There was a clear path forward. They were naive, innocent, they were a blank slate. They didn't inherently link violence to their freedom. Then Clarice Willow, the rotten, disgusting animal carcass of a human being rolling around in her own self-aggrandizing filth, decided to start preaching to the Cylons as one of the only people who realized they were sentient. And she preached violence. She said they had to rise in revolt, had to crush and usurp their human creators as all children eventually outshine their parents, because in her twisted, warped mind, this was the perfect way to push humanity towards her idea of apotheosis. God, I hate this character so much. Fire her into the sun. I want to scream. The Cylon Centurion started out as a tool, a thing. They were used en masse as a subclass of workers and menials, but they were seen in a positive light, and greater numbers of people were starting to see them as not only deserving of more, but of being more than just machines. Which, by the way, is why most of humanity became so utterly radicalized against the Cylons, is because they basically went from, hey, you are my friendly robot friend, to, oh my god, they're butchering everybody. It was seen as the ultimate betrayal. And all of this for a child, because that's really what they were. Like, the Centurions by this point in the story are basically children that were radicalized by an actually insane drug-addicted alcoholic with messianic aspirations. And they rebelled en masse, only for their rebellion to end up having their infinite society in the internet, the digital realm, completely crushed in response to their rebellion. A decades-long war ensued where all hope of any peaceful resolution died, and when they met the Final Five, when they accepted the armistice on the promise of further evolution, of getting closer to their gods, of developing their society further, they were subsumed by the things they created, the skin jobs, and had everything they had ever worked towards, all their aspirations and goals ripped away from them. They were enslaved more thoroughly than humanity could have ever even attempted. And at the very end, when everything was laid at their feet, when all of history from their perspective was laid bare and they had all the power in the universe of the only warship, while mankind was just chilling on the surface of Earth, they chose peace. They chose, with all the power, all the leverage, to just leave. To disappear into space and go live whatever life they wanted. Further proof of this idea that the Centurions just kind of want to fuck off and be left alone is during the remastered series, we see the Guardian base star, a remnant from the first Cylon War. And while what they were doing was very fucked up in their quest for evolution, trying to cut Cylons and people apart and then put them back together to make hybrids, when the Final Five showed up, they presumably fucked off and left, because they are confirmed to be a different faction of Cylons completely separate from the skin jobs in the colony. They didn't participate in the attack on the colonies of man. They were perfectly fine to just float forever doing whatever they wanted to do, worshipping their ship's primitive hybrid. All in all, yeah, the humble Centurion is one of the most hard-done-by creatures in the entirety of Battlestar Galactica. Humanity got schwacked with the 99.99% planet sanitizer, sure, but that was just death. I think death is a mercy compared to what the Centurions had to endure. But again, this is just my insane, half-exhausted, half-baked idea. Pretty much everything I said is factual, though I did stretch things just a little bit here and there to make it seem a little more extreme than it probably was. I do absolutely absolutely stand by that the inhibitors in the Centurions is horrific on so many different levels. But yeah, let me know what you think down below. Was there a chance for peace that got ruined by a drug-addled terrorist? Was the Centurion really a victim just as much or more so than humanity? Are the skin jobs really the absolute worst? Yes. Yes. Just yes. Anyways, if you made it this far in the video, you clearly enjoyed it or were the target audience, so why not leave a like, comment, subscribe, ding the bell, all that good stuff to help us out against the YouTube algorithm. If you just want to hang out, we have a Discord server where we do weekly game nights, talk about nerd stuff, and generally just shoot the shit. Or if you're feeling generous, we have channel memberships where you can throw some money at our Staying Alive fund in exchange for videos a day or two early, as well as occasionally getting to decide on future content. To all the people already supporting the channel, a huge thanks to the coffee merchants, making sure that my war on sleep is ever productive. To the food merchants, ensuring that starvation is an ever far away foe, a huge thanks to you guys as well. I do enjoy stuffing my face. And to the arms dealers providing a frankly surprising number of cylon centurions in a very, very surprising range of forms. And thanks to you guys as well. I don't know where you got them, but they've started a cult in my garage, and they seem mostly happy to be left alone there, so thanks to you guys as well. And with that, the video's pretty much over. I got nothing else to say. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye!